What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I did not do a video yesterday. Why? I'm gonna tell you. Because a couple of reasons. One is with all of this immigration stuff that's happening now, there's a lot of people who are pursuing U visas or other types of documentation, but they have tattoos, and there's a concern that their tattoos could be misidentified as gang related. The federal government calls just about anything they want gang related when it comes to tattoos on immigrants. And that's a field I've been in, of evaluating those tattoos and writing declarations since DACA, really. But work has died down in recent years, and now it's picking back up. So I've been fielding those emails and that work, which is fun for me. I enjoy it, and hopefully I can help some of these families be able to get what it is they're looking for. And then also the video I did Monday, I didn't feel like it really got out there as much as it should have, to be honest. And I dropped it a little bit later. That's about Tortuga on the Behind the or Between the Lines podcast, which I'll probably talk a little bit more about in a second. But I figured if I didn't do a video yesterday, maybe that would lead more people to go find that video from Monday. It was an experiment. It didn't really work, but I tried it. And if you have missed it, I'll link to it. I suggest you check it out. That's probably one of my favorite videos that I've done recently, and so anyways, this topic, this is a reaction of sorts as well, right? It's HoodStocks over the weekend. They had an individual on there named Jap. I don't know who Jap is. Not very familiar with him. I feel like I've seen him on social media before. I don't know exactly where. I know he's been on HoodStocks before, but I couldn't find those old episodes. He is from Southern California, right? Raza, did a bunch of time in the feds. And so he came on Lucky's channel again, but this time to talk about a particular experience with a particular celly. And that celly is Tarzan from Pomona 12th Street, Sarkeys. So for those that don't know, Tarzan is one of the original NF members, one of the original Nuestra Familia members. Most likely the thumbnail is going to have an old black and white picture on there. And if that's what I wind up putting up, that is the original NF members. And the guy who's cheesing, I'll look like that, right? That is Tarzan. And that's the day that he was inducted into the Familia. I believe that picture was taken like 1969, maybe 1970 at the latest, but I think 69. He had 51 years, right? He wound up passing away in 2020. 51 years of membership in the NF. I don't think there's anybody who remained NF member in good standings for that long, right? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think he outlasted definitely the norm, definitely the average, right? 50 years is above average for how long somebody is a part of that organization. And that's not criminal lifestyle, that's that organization. And I don't have a problem saying that because it is not top secret. There's tons of profiles on Tarzan out there, and he passed away. So, it's not like they're going to use it against him. So what I want to talk about is the dynamic, right? And the way this unfolded. And so, like I said, there's a bunch of profiles on Tarzan, so I'm not going to go into that. I have all the newspaper articles and all that stuff too. But safe to say, he had a history of violence, right? He was involved in shootings in the streets as a teenager. He was involved in stabbings in prison, knife fights with the MA, of course, right? Because that's what you do when you're in prison in the late 60s and early 70s. He, has killed at least one person in prison, stabbed a bunch of other folks. So violence was his thing. He was very comfortable with violence. And he loved to rob shit. He loved to rob banks, rob stores, mostly banks, and has robbed dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of banks, which is impressive in a sense. And I'm not condoning or promoting criminal activity, but it is impressive when you consider the dude never got out of prison in my lifetime, right? Like my entire lifetime. I'm 47 years old. I'll be 48 in a couple months. But from 77 on, he stayed locked up. So that's a lot of bank robberies in between stints in jail and stints in prison. So, and that's what he wound up going to the feds for, was bank robberies. He also has some mental health stuff. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He had gone to a Atascadero, which is the old mental hospital in the state, and people thought it was kind of a gimmick, maybe to try to get out of doing so much time or whatever. But nah, it wasn't a gimmick. He has some challenges. It'd be interesting. I guess we'll never know. But in the '70s, in his I think '77, when he gets picked up for this string of bank robberies, and he didn't get charged for all of them, but he was wanted for 20 over here and 30 in this, and 5 here and 2 there, and so when they picked him up, he was declared incompetent to stand trial, right? Because he thought he was Joaquin Murrieta, he's robbing from the rich and giving to the poor and blah, blah, blah. Really, he liked to play with his elbow, right? But he was schizophrenic, so he didn't get sentenced. He didn't go to trial. He was on pause from like 77 until like 1990 something, 94, I think, when he finally went to court for it and got convicted. But he was in federal custody. He was in Terminal Island. He was in New York. He was a bunch of places. Went to a bunch of federal hospitals. There's a well-documented history. It's pretty common knowledge that the federal government has experimented on inmates with different medical treatments and shock therapy and everything else. So, man, who knows what he endured? But nonetheless, he rode tough. He rode tough. In the '90s, he finally went to court and got sentenced to federal prison officially. Wound up stabbing his lawyer in the courtroom with a pen and whatnot over in LA, I guess. So just a violent dude, right? With the business, as people would say these days. And then even when he went to the feds and he was out on the yard, there wasn't, a whole bunch of NF running around. This dude was out of touch with the organization for decades, and things had changed, right? There was Northerners now. there was Norteños and Sureños, and you think, especially from a Northern perspective, all the schooling, all the clecha, all the this and that, and the cause and the movement, and all this flowery talk and propaganda and stuff that you learned coming up in that movement in my time frame. And Tarzan didn't get none of that. He was just doing his thing, right? And so fast forward to 2020. And, eventually he winds up running into folks. They got Black Widow, other federal indictments. NF members start popping up into the feds. They set up shop. They start to get Norteños coming in on cases and Norteños from other states. So, and he's embraced and it's all love, right? That's the big homie. That's Tarzan, from the perspective of those in there. And Tarzan a little off, but he does his thing, right? He does his thing. Just let him do his thing. And I've heard from folks, obviously I'd never been around the guy, but I've heard from folks that were around him. I've read some things from people who at least claim that they were around him, and all positive, right? All positive. He was out there getting his money still, was a good dude, and like I said, dude, you guys can watch other profiles to hear more stuff about that. What I want to get to is the hospital wing. So apparently he's diagnosed with blood cancer, which is rough, and they give him about a year to live. And he's in some hospital wing of some federal institution somewhere in the country. And that's where this guy Jap comes into the picture. He also had some form of cancer, had surgery. I could relate, right? He talks about how, they had cut him down the abdomen. He had the bag, all this other stuff. I'm like, I've been there, Holmes. I've been there, right? I get it. And they put him in a cell. He winds up being cellies with Tarzan. He doesn't know who Tarzan is. Hey, Holmes, I'm Jab from, wherever he's from. I think San Gabriel Valley. Tarzan's like, I'm Tarzan from 12th Street. Oh, like, cool. And they're older gentlemen, right? They're well-seasoned guys at this point. But nonetheless, they're in prison. They're in prison. They are affiliated. But they're just a little bit older. And they have this, they're both dealing with these serious medical conditions. And Jab goes on to explain how they're cellies for months. And neither one of them in great health. They were cool. all the talking that they would do in the cells, not they just sat there silent, right? You talk to Shelly, they'd go to this little yard together, spin some laps, tell stories, and it never came up. Jap never knew that this guy is Tarzan, one of the original NF members. Now, to be clear, Tarzan comes from an era where, again, there's no North and South. I mean, he's way before the North and South era. Obviously, he's from Southern California, so, which is a whole nother conversation. I've talked about it a little bit before. I'm sure it'll come up again in the future. I don't want to spend time with it now, but just saying it's not unusual. It's two guys from Southern California that are celled up. Tarzan knows, I'm sure, that Jap is not a Mexican mafia member. I don't know what would happen if that was the case. I'm mildly curious if he would have been as embracing, and Jap even says, like, hey, this fool, if he wanted to hurt me, he could have hurt me. And as somebody, Jap's a big dude, like that's going to be an assignment. That's a mission. You want to go take that guy down, right? Just kind of based on his size. But I know what it's like to go through those cancer surgeries and have your gut cut open and have the bag and everything. You ain't hurting nothing when you come out of those surgeries. You can have a knife strapped to both hands and you ain't going to do no damage, right? You just can't. Like, the surgery homes is undefeated. It is what it is. And Tarzan was in great shape. He was just dying of blood cancer. But so it's a trip, right? These guys hanging out, and it got me thinking, all the rah-rah you tend to hear on the internet, and not just YouTube channels, but the gangland type shows and all these things that celebrate gang culture and celebrate gang violence and who's the tough guy and who's the shot caller and who got the bodies and who put in work and all this other hogwash, Holmes. Is some of that true? Yeah, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but this is what you don't get the glimpse of, and this is what I think is almost more important, right? There's two guys struggling with health issues, both of them sitting in prison, and they're just trying to get better. They're trying to get better. They're helping each other to try to get better. There's a respect. There's a mutual understanding. We're in the same place, right? Physically, we're in the same cell. We're also kind of in the same place in life. You're away from your family. I'm away from my family. We're fighting cancer. We're in federal prison. Why make life more difficult for each other? Like, what the fuck does that prove? What does that do? Right? Tarzan was, I'm big bad NF, and I don't think it was from a place of fear. I just think he wasn't tripping. He just wasn't tripping, right? Like, that's not all there is to life. That's not all there was to him. He probably liked, get the Sally, another dude from Southern California, would tell stories. Tarzan hadn't been in the streets since, like I said, since I was born, right? So, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall in that cell, as long as I could fly out of the bars and go. But I think it kind of breaks down or challenges this narrative, the tough guy, pom-pom, rah-rah narrative. And that's what a lot of these older dudes, in my experience around some of them, that's pretty consistent. You think of Hobo. Somebody asked me about him on a live the other day, and do you ever do time with Hobo from San Francisco, right? He was an NF member from the old school. Not that generation. He's not in that picture. But I think he's like second generation. And same thing with the sick, kill the AB guy, stabbings, all the stuff that all these guys were going through in prison, right? He went through all that and endured and sat down in the California Department of Corrections for over 40 years before he came home. You talk to him now, he doesn't want to talk about all that. He knows all these dudes, all the guys in the encyclopedias and the history books and shit. He knows all them. He did time with them. He was a kid when they were a kid and they were trying to figure out how to survive in prison, right? But what does he want to talk about now? The young people at the elementary school where he goes and shows love and tries to create opportunities. And what is it like, man, in San Francisco and trying to get that remnant of the population that made San Francisco the amazing city it was when I was young, right? That is now largely forgotten, but they're still on these back streets and in these projects and in these corners and trying to make sure that they're not forgetting and they got services and they have opportunities and bringing the legal marijuana business to San Francisco for communities of color. Like, it's that fool's helping to change the world. And he will talk all day about all that, right? Before he's going to talk about, oh, so were you a captain or you were a lieutenant? And when did this happen? And when, I don't fucking, why we talk about that, right? That's, his thing. We talk about that. What's that got to do with the price of eggs today? Carlitos from San Jose, younger compared to these guys, a little bit younger, NF member, same thing, and got dozens, literally dozens of pegadas in the California Department of Corrections, right? But in all my conversations with him, and some of you guys remember when I had posted those a while back, and I still gotta follow up and get the audio fixed to post them in the future. But in my conversations with him, never a derogatory word about the other side, the other group. He talked about the brothers, he talked about TS, he talked about the MA, he talked about all these different groups. Never once used a derogatory word in discussing any of them, right? Except gay people. You don't like gay people. He got words for the homosexuals. But other than that, that's him. And then you compare that to Wino Perez came on here on YouTube a while back, and he's, well, I'll just call him this because that's how I was raised. If you don't knock it the fuck off, you made a lifetime commitment and went to the streets and disappeared repeatedly, right? So, yeah, you did what you did in prison. Sounds good, and you was a member of that. But all that having to put extra on it because you're on YouTube, not a good look, right? Not a good look. It's I don't know. I really enjoyed hearing the story, and you hear the respect that Jap had for him and the reverence, right? He even referenced at one point in the video, he's like, man, that's my OG, that's my OG homie. And not in a gang sense, just man to man, he's in his 60s. There's not a whole lot of people he's calling OG in your 60s in prison. But Tarzan's older. And so just that respect as two men going through something and supporting each other in that. Some of these cats will have you believe that it's all bloodshed all the time and it's all fuck the other side and there ain't no love and I'm standing on business and yada, yada, yada. And yeah, when you're 15, 18, 20, sir, right, you're gangbanging. It's juvenile behavior. It's young mischief that's just incredibly violent. But at some point, folks grow up. And even these guys, even these heavyweights, even these folks that have risen to the top of the ladders that they chose to climb, there's a respect level. And yes, folks will take your win in a heartbeat, but God, isn't there more to life than that? Right? Is that all that's going to define you? How are you when you're stuck in a cell and there's a dude next to you that just got out of surgery, right? And I think it was a great representation. I've seen the views; they're kind of going up a little bit on the HoodStocks. I would love to see it get more views, and I think Lucky did a great job handling the conversation. And generally, I think Lucky's a respectful dude. He caps off and shit, but I've never heard Lucky get disrespectful on some gangbanging stuff with people. He just tells it like it is, and some people don't like it. But it was a good conversation, and I'll wrap it up with this, man. You can tell the respect and the reverence, the way that Jap realizes, who his cellie was, because at this point he had passed, is the prison, the administration was like, hey, get his stuff together. But they don't send your stuff home for you. They ain't doing none of that, right? It probably donated to some people that cooperate with them or something. So Jap's going through his property, and his mail. He's looking for an address. Like, man, who have you written a handful of times that I might be able to send this stuff to? And in the process of doing so, comes across pictures. There's all these norteños everywhere, right? And he's like, what? He's from Pomona, you know? And then does a little homework and realizes, oh, he's that guy, right? Wow, that's a trip. You know, not every day that you get to sell up with, you know, a founding member of the NF, in particular as a Southsider, right? So but there was no disrespect. There was none of that. And I don't know, man, I enjoy seeing that. And I wish the glimpses into this, like I had talked about the Tortuga video that I did on Monday. And people in the comments, is he active? Is he this? Is he that? Look, I can tell you what yard he's on, right? He's in Centinela, general population mainline, doing his thing, right? He's not on an S&Y yard. He's not on an integrated yard. But what does that have to do? Like, it's crazy that our mind is conditioned to go there, because if you listen to his interview, it's not about his gang affiliation. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about bigger things, more important things, more relevant things. And it's like some folks, and this isn't me taking shots at anybody in the comments, whatever, don't get mad at me. It's just interesting that some folks will miss that. And what matters is his status to some, rather than the value of what he has to say. Is the truth of what he's saying more true if he's on this kind of yard versus that kind of yard? Is he more authentic if he's on this yard versus that yard? We're not talking about gangs. He is not a video about gangs. It's not an interview about gangs. It's an interview about him and doing 32 fucking years in solitary confinement and now being out on a main line and what that looks like. And my conversation is, I seen this dude in the shoe for years. I watched him walk to yard. I got an idea of his temperament, and he was angry. And he says he was angry. And I seen it. He looked like he was angry, right? And now he looks borderline peaceful. Even though he's sitting on level 4 yard in prison, a way that you could tell that anger has changed. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that video. That's why I did that video, so I could get into that subject. Again, I'll link to it. I suggest you guys check it out. And I'll drop a link in the description of this to the HoodStocks video. If I ever do a video and I make reference to some video that I watched, look in the description of the video and you'll find a link to that video. Because a lot of people ask me in the comments on the Tortuga one, hey, where can I find this interview you're referencing? Just look in the description of the video and it'll say, and there'll be a link. You just click that link. It's fucking magic. Boom. You're right there, right? So anyways, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And I hope that this kind of makes sense. I know it's a little all over the map, but really I just want you guys to go watch that. And I think it's cool. I think, you know, unfortunate that Tarzan died. We all have our day, right? We're not going to live forever. I'm thankful that he was in a cell with somebody that was kind with him. And I just find it ironic, you know, who it was and that dynamic. And yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a trip, man. So thought I'd share it with you guys and encourage you to go check it out. All right, folks, take care.